Good evening, friends. Tonight, we'll drift into the gentle mists of time, where ancient pyramids rise slowly from emerald jungles, and the whispers of a remarkable civilization still echo through the warm tropical air. I'm speaking to you from a quiet evening here, where the day has settled into that perfect twilight hour when the world grows soft around the edges. Take a moment now to dim your lights. Let your shoulders release any tension they've been carrying from the day. Pull that comfortable blanket up around you. Find that perfect position where your body can simply let go. Tonight, we're traveling together to the heart of Mesoamerica, where the Maya people created one of history's most fascinating civilizations, not through conquest or drama, but through the quiet brilliance of human ingenuity, the patient observation of stars, and the gentle rhythm of daily life that flowed like honey through centuries. If this calm journey helps you unwind, if these ancient whispers bring you peace, feel free to tap like and subscribe, but only if it feels right at this moment. No pressure. Just an invitation to join our community of dreamers and history wanderers. Let your breathing slow as we begin our journey back through time, where the pace of life moved like morning mist through the jungle canopy, where every day brought its own quiet miracles. Let me tell you about a morning that happened over 1,000 years ago, in a place where the jungle breathed with life and the air hung thick and sweet with the scent of cacao flowers. Picture, if you will, the soft light of dawn filtering through the canopy of a rainforest in what we now call Guatemala. Around the year 800 CE, the mist rises gently from the forest floor, carrying with it the distant sound of howler monkeys calling to each other across the treetops, a sound that hasn't changed in all these centuries. In this gentle morning light, a Maya artisan named Itzel sits cross-legged on a woven mat outside her stone house. Her fingers, stained green from years of working with jade, move with the practiced rhythm of someone who has found their life's calling. Before her lies a piece of jade the color of deep forest shadows, and she's about to transform it into something that will survive longer than empires. Can you imagine the weight of that stone in your hands? Jade was more precious to the Maya than gold ever was to the Spanish, who would come centuries later. They called it the stone of the heart, believing it held the very essence of life itself. As its soul works, she hums softly a melody that might have been passed down through generations, the same way her grandmother taught her to see the hidden shapes inside raw stone. The Maya understanding of jade goes back to around 1000 BC, when they first began carving this precious green stone into masks, jewelry, and ritual objects. But what makes this particularly beautiful for our sleepy journey tonight is how they worked not with the frantic energy of modern manufacturing, but with the patient persistence of water wearing away rock. Each piece took weeks, sometimes months, to complete. Itzel dips her copper chisel into a bowl of water mixed with crushed jade dust, creating an abrasive paste that will slowly, gently carve away the excess stone. The sound is barely audible, a soft scraping, rhythmic and hypnotic, like rain on leaves. She's creating a pendant that will be worn by a young woman in an upcoming ceremony. A piece that needs to catch moonlight just so, that needs to feel cool against warm skin during the humid nights of the rainy season. As she works, neighbors pass by on the packed earth pathway that winds through their neighborhood. This isn't the grand ceremonial center with its towering pyramids that's a day's walk away. This is where ordinary Maya people lived their extraordinary, ordinary lives. Children run past chasing a rubber bolius. The Maya invented rubber balls centuries before anyone else figured out how to bounce things for fun. Their laughter mingles with the soft conversation of women grinding corn for the morning meal. The rhythmic thok-thok of stone against stone that formed the percussion section of daily life, fitted together so precisely that you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. No mortar, no cementage, the patience to cut each stone until it fit perfectly with its neighbors. The roofs are thatched with palm fronds, creating homes that stayed cool in the tropical heat and dry during the torrential rains that define the seasons here. But let's follow the scent of copal incense, drifting on the morning breeze. It leads us to another artisan, this one working with obsidian volcanic glass, sharper than any modern razor blade. His name is Akbal, and he's sitting in the shade of a cecropier tree, its large leaves creating a natural umbrella above his workspace. The obsidian comes from volcanoes hundreds of miles away, traded along routes that connected Maya cities across vast distances. Watch his hands as he works, movements so precise they seem choreographed. He's creating arrow points, but also mirrors, ceremonial knives, and decorative inlays. The Maya discovered that obsidian, when properly knapped, could create an edge only one molecule thick. They were performing microsurgery with Stone Age tools, achieving precision that wouldn't be matched again until the invention of modern surgical instruments. The sound of his work is different from Itzel's jade carving, sharper, more staccato. Tiny flakes of obsidian fall like black snow onto the leather pad beneath his hands. Each piece will be saved, sorted, and used for smaller projects. Nothing is wasted in this society that understands scarcity and abundance. As two faces of the same jade mask, as the morning progresses, the temperature begins to rise, and the sounds of the community shift accordingly. The urgent work of the cool morning hours gives way to the more leisurely pace of approaching midday. Children retreat to the shade, and artisans begin to wrap their work in soft cotton cloth for protection. Itzel examines her jade pendant in the strengthening light. The stone seems to glow from within, as if it holds a piece of the forest's own green luminescence. She's carved a stylized jaguar face into its surface knot, the fierce, snarling beast you might expect, but something more subtle. The Maya jaguar is contemplative, wise, its spots represented by tiny circular indentations that catch and hold shadows, making the pendant seem to shift and change as light moves across it. This is when you realize that Maya artisans weren't just craftspeople, they were philosophers working in stone and jade. Each piece carried meaning, layered upon meaning. The jaguar represented the night sun, the ruler of the underworld, the embodiment of power that moved silently through darkness. But it also represented the shaman's ability to move between worlds, the teacher who could navigate both the seen and unseen realms as afternoon approaches, bringing with it the daily rain that will drum softly on thatched roofs throughout the community. Both Itzel and Akbal begin to clean their work areas. Tools are wrapped in oiled leather. Precious materials are stored in lidded ceramic jars, and the workshops transform back into living spaces where families will gather for the evening meal. The rain, when it comes, arrives like a blessing. First, you hear it approaching through the foresta, distant whisper that grows into a gentle roar as it moves through the canopy above. Then the first drops fall, warm and welcome, turning the dust of the pathways into soft mud that will dry by, morning into new patterns of daily life. This is the rhythm that shaped Maya civilization. For over 2,000 years, the patient cycle of wet and dry season, the daily rounds of specialized craftwork, the gentle accumulation of knowledge and skill passed from generation to generation like treasured heirlooms. No rushing, no deadline pressure, just the steady progression of human hands creating beauty from raw materials. Day after day, year after year, in this rain-cooled afternoon, as water runs in gentle streams from thatched roofs and the air fills with the green scent of growing things, the Maya artisans rest. Their work will resume tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, creating an unbroken chain of human creativity that stretches back to the very beginnings of their civilization and forward into dreams we can barely imagine. That the jade pendant catches raindrops on its surface, each drop acting like a tiny lens that magnifies the intricate carved details. For a moment, in the shifting light and water, the jade jaguar seems to blink, as if awakening from a thousand-year dream to observe our modern world with ancient, patient eyes as evening settles over the forest, bringing with it the soft chorus of tree frogs and the distant call of night birds. The work of preservation continues, not just the preservation of jade and obsidian artifacts, but the preservation of knowledge, of techniques, of the quiet wisdom that comes from watching materials transform under patient, skilled hands. And in that gentle transformation, as day becomes night and ancient becomes eternal, we find ourselves drifting deeper into the peaceful heart of Maya civilization, where time moves like honey and beauty emerges slowly, inevitably, from the marriage of human intention and natural material. Let your own hands relax as we prepare to journey deeper into this world where everything important happens slowly, deliberately, with the patient grace of jade taking shape beneath knowing fingers. Now, let your mind wander to a different kind of workshop, one that exists not in the shade of earthly trees, but under the vast canopy of stars themselves. We're climbing now, following stone steps worn smooth by countless feet, up the steep sides of a pyramid that rises from the jungle floor like a mountain built by human dreams. The air grows cooler as we ascend, and with each step, the sounds of the village below become softer, more distant, until all we can hear is our own breathing and the whisper of wind through ancient stonework. At the top of this pyramid, in a chamber designed to frame specific portions of the sky, sits Itsamna, though that's not his birth name, but rather the title he's earned through decades of patient observation. His eyes now lined with the gentle wrinkles that come from squinting at distant celestial objects, hold the accumulated wisdom of 40 years spent tracking the dance of planets and stars. Around him, carved into stone panels and painted on pottery vessels, are mathematical calculations that won't be rediscovered by European astronomers for another 500 years. The Maya, you see, didn't just look up at the night sky and see pretty twinkling lights. They saw a vast clockwork, a cosmic calendar more precise than anything we use today. They calculated the length of the solar year to 365.2420 days. We now know it's actually 365.2422 days. They missed by just 17 seconds per year. Let that sink in for a moment as you settle more deeply into your pillows. Without telescopes, without computers, using only naked eyes and stone instruments, they achieved an accuracy that wouldn't be surpassed until the age of atomic clocks. Insomnia shifts slightly on his woven mat, adjusting the position of a crystal that he uses to focus starlight. The crystal itself is a marvel, perfectly clear quartz that the Maya somehow learned to shape and polish to optical precision. When you hold it up to catch the light of Venus just before dawn, it splits that light into components that reveal, well, that's knowledge that was lost when the Spanish burned the Maya books, treating mathematical genius as devil worship. But tonight, we're here before that tragedy. In the Golden Age, when Maya astronomers were quietly mapping the universe with a precision that makes our modern GPS satellites seem almost crude by comparison, Insomnia is tracking Venus, not just its bright appearance in the evening or morning sky, but its complete 584-day cycle as it weaves between Earth and the Sun. He knows that Venus will appear as evening star for 263 days, then disappear for 8 days as it passes between Earth and Sun, then return as a morning star for 263 days, then vanish again for 50 days as it passes behind the Sun. This might sound like dry mathematics, but to the Maya, Venus was Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, a deity whose movements governed everything from when to plant crops to when to wage war. The beauty of Maya astronomy wasn't separate from daily life. It was the invisible framework that made daily life possible, predictable and meaningful, as the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the eastern horizon. Insomnia makes precise notches on a bone calendar stick. Each mark represents a day in calculations that stretch forward and backward in time for millions of years. The Maya were obsessed with vast cycles of time, not just the solar year or the lunar month, but the 5,125-year-long count that tracked the current age of the world, and even longer cycles that won't complete for millions of years. Imagine the peaceful confidence this gave them. While other civilizations worried about the end of the world, the Maya knew exactly when this cosmic age would end: December 21st, 2012. By our calendar end, they weren't worried about it, because they knew it was just the completion of one cycle and the beginning of another. Time, for the Maya, wasn't linear, but circular, like the gentle breathing that's carrying you deeper into relaxation, right? Now, the pyramid where Insomnia works wasn't built randomly. Every angle, every orientation, every window and doorway was positioned to capture specific astronomical alignments. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun creates a shadow that moves down the pyramid steps like a serpent descending from heaven to earth. The effect lasts exactly 3 hours and 22 minutes, and it happens with clockwork precision, twice every year, year after year, century after century. But the real magic happens during eclipses. Insomnia can predict both solar and lunar eclipses years in advance, calculating not just when they'll occur, but exactly where on Earth they'll be visible. The Maya eclipse tables, preserved in the Dresden Codex, are accurate for over 500 years. They understood that eclipses follow an 11-day cycle called the Sarasa discovery that modern astronomy credits to ancient Babylonians, not realizing that Maya astronomers were making the same calculations independently on the other side of the world as dawn light grows stronger, filtering through the carefully placed window openings in Itzamna's observatory. Other astronomers begin to arrive. There's Xgel, who specializes in tracking the complex 18.6-year cycle of lunar standstills, the points where the moon reaches its extreme northern and southern positions, and Chalk, whose expertise is the synodic periods of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Planetary movements so complex that modern computers need thousands of calculations to predict them accurately. They don't speak much as they work. The morning observations require total concentration. And besides, they've been working together for so many years that communication happens through subtle gestures, the slight adjustment of an instrument, the careful notation of measurements in their bark paper books. These books, called codices, contain knowledge that represents thousands of years of accumulated observation and calculation. The Maya writing system itself reflects their astronomical obsession. Their date notation is more precise than ours, instead of just giving year, month, and day. Maya dates include the day of the sacred round, their 260-day ritual calendar, the day of the solar round, their 365-day agricultural calendar, the long count position tracking the days since the current creation, and additional information about lunar cycles and planetary position. A fully notated Maya date tells you not just when something happened, but where that moment fits in the vast cosmic machinery of time. What's particularly beautiful about Maya astronomy is how it integrates with their understanding of human nature and social organization. They didn't see themselves as separate from the cosmos, but as participants in its grand cycles. The movement of Venus-guided military campaigns, the phases of the moon determined the best times for planting and harvesting. The position of the Pleiades constellation told them when the rains would come as the morning progresses and the sun climbs higher, making further stellar observations impossible until evening. The astronomers begin their other work though, complex calculations needed to maintain their calendars and predict future astronomical events. They use a sophisticated based 1T number system. We use based-in that includes the concept of zero as a placeholder, mathematical innovation that wouldn't appear in Europe for several more centuries. Their calculations are performed using jade and obsidian counters on stone counting boards, with results recorded using a dot and bar notation system so elegant that a Maya child could perform multiplication and division, problems that would challenge a modern adult using Roman numerals. The dots represent ones, the bars represent fives, and positions indicate powers of 20. Simple, efficient, beautiful. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Maya astronomy is its patience. These calculations span not just years or decades, but millennia. Itzamna is working on predictions that won't be verified until long after his great-great-grandchildren are dust. He's participating in a project that began before his birth and will continue long after his death, the slow, careful mapping of cosmic time by human intelligence. As the morning heat begins to build and the Frix astronomers prepare to rest during the hot hours of midday, They clean their instruments with the same ritual care that Itzel showed for her jade carving tools. Crystal lenses are wrapped in soft cotton, bone calendar sticks are returned to leather cases, and the precious codices are stored in sealed ceramic containers that will protect them from humidity and insects in the quiet of the observatory. As the sounds of the waking city drift up from below, there's a profound sense of continuity. The same stars that Itzamna observes tonight were watched by his teachers, and by their teachers, stretching back through generations of patient, careful observers who understood that the universe operates according to laws that can be discovered, calculated, and predicted by human intelligence, working with unlimited time and unlimited care, and in that timeless patience. As the Maya astronomers settle into the restful heat of midday, we find ourselves drifting deeper into their world, a world where time moves in vast, peaceful cycles, where human life finds its meaning by aligning with cosmic rhythms, and where the patient observation of celestial beauty becomes a form of prayer that stretches across centuries like light from distant stars. Follow me now down winding pathways that lead from the astronomical heights to something equally magical but grounded in rich, dark earth. We're descending into the agricultural heart of Maya civilization, where human ingenuity transformed into gardens so productive they could feed cities, so innovative they seem almost mythical to our modern eyes. The morning mist clings to the surface of canals that reflect the sky like mirrors, and somewhere in the distance you can hear the gentle splash of a paddle as someone guides their canoe between the floating gardens. These are the Chinampas, though. That's actually an Aztec word, and we're in Maya territory, where they called them something that translates roughly to raised fields where the earth floats. Imagine, if you will, beds of incredibly fertile soil that seem to hover just above the water's surface, connected by a network of canals so precisely engineered that water flows exactly where it's needed, when it's needed, creating an agricultural system that produces more food per acre than modern industrial farming. Let me introduce you to Itzalnat, the Jade Carver from our first chapter, but her cousin, who chose to dedicate her life to the patient art of making food grow in impossible places. She's standing knee-deep in canal water that's warm from yesterday's sun, her hands working to weave together water, hyacinth roots, and marsh grass into the foundation of a new garden bed. This isn't quick work, it's the kind of task that unfolds over weeks, requiring the same patient attention to detail that her cousin brings to stone carving. The process begins with understanding water. The Maya engineers who designed these systems possessed an intuitive grasp of hydrology that wouldn't be matched in Europe until the Renaissance. They knew how to read the subtle signs that indicate where water wants to flow, how to work with seasonal flooding rather than fighting it, how to create gradients so gentle that water moves exactly fast enough to prevent stagnation, but not so fast as to cause erosion. Itzal's tools are simpler: long wooden pole for measuring water depth, a sharp obsidian blade for cutting plant materials, and most importantly, her hands, which can feel through the murky water to identify the texture of mud, the density of root systems, the precise point where floating vegetation becomes stable enough to support soil and crops. She works with the same meditative focus that characterizes all Maya craftsmanship, each movement deliberate and considered. The floating gardens themselves are marvels of biological engineering. The base layer consists of water plants woven together so tightly they create a living mat that won't sink or break apart. On top of this goes a mixture of lake, mud, and decomposed organic matter, creating soil so rich and black it almost seems artificial. The Maya understood composting, crop rotation, and companion planting centuries before these became formal agricultural sciences. What makes this particularly beautiful to contemplate as you drift toward sleep is the time frame. These floating gardens weren't built in a season or even a year. They were constructed slowly, carefully, with constant adjustments and improvements that spanned generations. A garden bed that Itzel's grandmother started as a young woman might only now be reaching full productivity. Its soil deepened and enriched by decades of careful tending. The crops themselves tell a story of patient observation and selective breeding that rivals any modern agricultural program. The Maya didn't just plant corn, they developed dozens of varieties, each adapted to specific conditions. There's corn that thrives in the constant moisture of the floating gardens, corn that prefers the drier conditions of hillside terraces, corn that produces better during the rainy season, and corn that stores well through the dry months. And then there are the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash planted together in a symbiotic relationship that the Maya understood long before European science discovered nitrogen fixation. The corn provides a natural trellis for the beans to climb. The beans add nitrogen to the soil that feeds the corn and squash. The large squash leaves shade the soil, preventing weeds and retaining moisture. It's a perfect closed-loop system that produces more food using fewer resources than any single crop could manage alone. But let's follow the gentle sound of water lapping against the garden edges and discover it's Samnanat, the astronomer, but the hydraulic engineer whose understanding of water flow makes these floating gardens possible. He's checking the flow rates through the canal system, adjusting wooden gates that control how much water moves from one section to another. His knowledge was gained not from books, but from years of patient observation, from understanding how water behaves in different seasons, during different weather patterns, under different load conditions. The canals themselves serve multiple purposes. They're transportation arteries, where canoes loaded with produce move silently through the early morning mist. They're fish farms, where several species of native fish are raised in managed populations. They're drainage systems that prevent flooding during the intense rains of the wet season. And they're recreational spaces where families gather in the cool of evening to bathe and socialize, and watch the stars reflect in the still water. The fish deserve special mention because they represent another level of Maya agricultural sophistication. Rather than simply catching wild fish, they practiced a form of aquaculture that increased productivity while maintaining ecological balance. Certain fish species were encouraged because they ate mosquito larvae, reducing disease transmission. Others were valued because they consumed organic waste, helping to maintain water quality. Still others were raised specifically for food, but in numbers calculated to prevent overpopulation and resource depletion. As the day progresses and the sun climbs higher, the floating gardens take on an almost dreamlike quality. Steam rises from the warm earth, creating a microclimate that's several degrees cooler than the surrounding areas. The air is thick with humidity and the green scent of growing things. Dragonflies dart between the crop rows, their wings catching and scattering sunlight like tiny prisms. This is when you begin to understand that Maya agriculture wasn't just about producing food. It was about creating sustainable ecosystems that could support dense populations for centuries without depleting the natural resources they depended on. The floating gardens improved over time rather than degrading, becoming more productive as the soil deepened and the plant communities stabilized. The social organization required for this level of agricultural sophistication is equally impressive. The floating gardens belonged to individual families, but the canal systems were community projects that required coordinated planning and maintenance across multiple generations. Water rights were carefully regulated, with complex agreements about who could draw water when and how much. Maintenance schedules were coordinated so that necessary repairs to canals and drainage systems didn't disrupt the growing seasons. Children grew up understanding this system from their first steps. They learned to pole canoes through the narrow waterways before they could read Maya glyphs. They understood which plants could be harvested and which needed to be left to mature, which fish could be caught and which needed to be preserved for breeding. This wasn't formal education, but cultural transmission, knowledge passed down through daily participation in the rhythms of agricultural life. What's particularly wonderful to contemplate as evening approaches and the gardens settle into their nighttime quiet is the integration of beauty and function that characterizes everything the Maya built. The floating gardens weren't just efficient, they were gorgeous, with flowering borders that attracted beneficial insects, fruit trees that provided shade and seasonal variety, and ornamental plants that served ceremonial purposes during religious festivals. The evening harvest is a quiet affair. Families move through their garden plots as the sun sets, gathering vegetables for the evening meal and flowers for household altars. The sound of water lapping against the garden edges mingles with soft conversation and the distant call of night birds beginning their evening songs. Canoes loaded with produce move silently through the canal network, their occupants steering by starlight and the intimate knowledge of every turn and shallow place accumulated over lifetimes of navigation. As full darkness settles over the floating gardens, bringing with it the gentle sounds of fish jumping and the soft splash of night-feeding birds, the agricultural day ends as peacefully as it began. The gardens themselves continue their quiet work of growth and production, drawing nutrients from the rich water, converting sunlight into food, participating in the vast cycles of birth and harvest that have sustained human civilization for thousands of years. In this peaceful rhythm of agricultural life, where human intelligence worked with natural systems rather than against them, where productivity increased through patience rather than force, we find ourselves drifting deeper into the Maya understanding of time and sustainability, where every action considered its effects 7 generations into the future, and where the gentle cultivation of floating gardens created abundance that seemed to rise from the water itself, like offerings from some benevolent earth goddess. Let your consciousness drift now into the cool shade of a great stone building where the most precious work of Maya civilization unfolds in careful, meditative silence. We're entering the scriptorium, though the Maya would have called it something like the house where thoughts become eternal, where scribes, bent over bark paper books, are performing a kind of magic that transforms spoken words into symbols that will survive longer than the people who created them. The air here is thick with the scent of copal incense and the earthy smell of fresh bark paper. Somewhere you can hear the soft scratch of brushes made from animal hair, dipped in inks created from ground minerals and plant dyes, slowly building up the complex glyphs that encode everything from astronomical calculations to epic poetry. This is where human consciousness learned to extend itself beyond the limitations of individual memory, creating external storage for the accumulated wisdom of generations. Meet Akbel, whose name means darkness, but whose work illuminates the shadows of the past for anyone wise enough to learn the reading of glyphs. He's not just a scribe, but a scholar, mathematician, historian, and artist, all combined into one person. His fingers, stained permanent blue from working with indigo ink, move across the bark paper with the same patient precision that we've seen in Jade carvers and astronomers. But Akbel is working with something even more complex than stone or stars. He's working with the living structure of language itself. Maya writing is the most sophisticated system ever developed in the Americas. The only true writing in the New World that could record any spoken statement with complete accuracy. It's a combination of logographic and syllabic elements. Some symbols represent entire words or concepts, while others represent individual sounds that can be combined to spell out any word in the Maya language. Imagine a writing system that combines the efficiency of Chinese characters with the flexibility of alphabetic letters, and you begin to understand the intellectual achievement represented by Maya glyphs. What makes this particularly wonderful for our quiet journey tonight is how Maya writing developed. Unlike other writing systems that began with simple pictographs and slowly became more abstract, Maya glyphs started as art and remained artistic throughout their evolution. Every text is simultaneously a work of literature and a visual masterpiece, with scribes competing not just for accuracy but for elegance, beauty, and creative flair in their glyph compositions. Akbel is currently working on a historical text that records the deeds of a ruler who died 3 generations ago. But this isn't simple chronicle writing, it's a complex narrative that weaves together historical facts, mythological parallels, astronomical observations, and prophetic implications. The text needs to work on multiple levels simultaneously, communicating different meanings to readers with different levels of education and initiation into sacred knowledge. The physical act of writing requires extraordinary skill. Maya scribes used brushes made from animal hair, with the finest detail work performed using brushes made from single hairs plucked from squirrel tails. The inks were prepared according to recipes that were closely guarded trade secrets, some requiring ingredients that had to be gathered during specific phases of the moon or particular seasons of the year. The bark paper itself represents another level of technological sophistication. Made from the inner bark of fig trees, it was prepared through a process that could take weeks. The bark was stripped, soaked, beaten to separate the fibers, then pressed and dried into sheets that were more durable than European parchment and much more economical to produce than Egyptian papyrus. A single book might contain over 100 pages, representing months of work just to prepare the writing surface. But the real magic happens in the structure of Maya texts themselves. Unlike our linear writing, that moves from left to right across the page. Maya texts are organized in columns that read in a zigzag pattern down to glyph blocks, then down the next 2 blocks to the right, creating a reading rhythm that mirrors the back-and-forth movement of agricultural work. The rise and fall of spoken conversation, the natural rhythms of thought itself. Each glyph is a small work of art, often incorporating the faces of gods, the forms of animals, or abstract geometric patterns that carry meaning beyond their phonetic value. A single glyph might include the main sign that carries the primary meaning, smaller signs that modify that meaning, and decorative elements that indicate the status level appropriate for reading that particular text. It's writing that functions simultaneously as literature, art, and social identifier. As the morning progresses and the light streaming through the carefully positioned windows shifts across Akbal's work surface, other scribes arrive to continue their own projects. There's Itzamna, working on astronomical tables that calculate eclipse predictions hundreds of years into the future, and Ixchel, whose specialty is the complex historical texts that trace royal genealogies back through mythological time to the gods themselves. The collaboration between scribes is one of the most beautiful aspects of Maya intellectual culture. Knowledge belonged to the community rather than to individuals, so scribes freely shared techniques, compared calculations, and helped each other solve complex problems of translation and interpretation. A text begun by one scribe might be continued by another after the first one's death, with seamless integration that suggests a level of intellectual cooperation that was rare in the ancient world. Maya books covered every subject imaginable. There were astronomical texts that could predict planetary positions centuries in advance, historical chronicles that preserved the details of political alliances and military campaigns, religious texts that encoded the complex mythological narratives that explained how the world was created and how it would eventually end, medical texts that described surgical procedures and pharmaceutical preparations, and literary works, poetry, epic narratives, dramatic texts that entertained and educated simultaneously. What's particularly remarkable is the level of accuracy achieved in these hand-copied texts. Modern comparison of multiple copies of the same astronomical tables shows variations of less than 1%, indicating a level of precision that rivals modern printing. This accuracy was achieved through elaborate checking procedures, with multiple scribes verifying each other's work and master scribes reviewing all texts before they were considered complete. The loss of Maya books represents one of history's greatest intellectual tragedies. When Spanish conquistadors and missionaries encountered Maya libraries, they saw only devil worship and ordered the books burned. In a single day in 1562, Bishop Diego de Landa destroyed over 5,000 Maya books in the town square of Mani. Of the hundreds of thousands of books that once existed, only 4 complete texts survive today, preserved by chance in European libraries where they were kept as curiosities. But in our peaceful journey back to the golden age of Maya writing, before that destruction, we can imagine the great libraries that once existed in cities like Copan and Palenque. Rooms lined with wooden shelves holding thousands of books, their bark paper pages filled with the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Scribes and scholars traveled hundreds of miles to consult rare texts, copying sections that were relevant to their own research, adding their own observations and calculations to the growing body of human knowledge. As afternoon heat begins to build and the scribes prepare to rest during the hottest part of the day, they carefully clean their brushes and store their work in progress. Each book is wrapped in cotton cloth and placed in a cedar box that will protect it from humidity and insects. The inks are covered to prevent evaporation, and the workspace is swept clean of any bark paper fragments that might attract pests in the quiet of the afternoon rest. As the scribes settle into hammocks strung in the cool corridors of their building, there's a profound sense of participation in something larger than individual life. Each text they create adds to the growing library of human knowledge. Each accurate calculation extends the reach of Maya science. Each beautifully crafted glyph preserves not just information, but the aesthetic sensibility of their civilization. The evening shift brings different work. This is when scribes copy their draft texts onto final presentation copies, using their finest brushes and most expensive inks. These books will be given as gifts to other cities, stored in royal libraries, or used in ceremonies where the act of reading becomes a performance that brings mythological narratives to life for assembled communities. As darkness falls and oil lamps are lit throughout the scriptorium, the work of preserving knowledge continues. The soft scratch of brushes on bark paper mingles with the distant sounds of the city settling into evening routines. And in that gentle, rhythmic sound of writing implements moving across paper, we find ourselves drifting deeper into the Maya understanding of time and memory, where human consciousness learned to extend itself beyond individual lifetimes, creating external repositories of wisdom that would survive as long as there were eyes to read and minds to understand. The sacred dance of meaning made visible. Come with me now, along paths that stretch like threads across the vast tapestry of Maya civilization, connecting distant cities through networks of trade that moved more than mere goods. They carried ideas, innovations, and the quiet conversations that bind cultures together across impossible distances. We're following a trading expedition that will take months to complete, moving at the patient pace of human feet along trails that wind through jungle and over mountain passes, crossing rivers on log bridges and sleeping under stars that have guided travelers for thousands of years. Our guide is Itzalnot, the Jade carver or the agriculturalist, but the merchant whose understanding of distant places and exotic goods makes her one of the most valuable members of Maya society. She moves with the confident stride of someone who has walked these trails so many times they feel like extensions of her own home. But her eyes never stop observing, cataloging, noting the subtle changes that indicate shifts in weather patterns, political situations, or resource availability that might affect trade routes and profit margins. The trading party consists of 12 people, each carrying roughly 60 pounds of goods in backpacks made from woven maguey fiber and waterproofed with tree resin. They'll cover about 15 miles per day, walking from before dawn until the heat becomes too intense, then resting during the afternoon and walking again in the cool of evening. This isn't hurried traveling's the sustainable pace that allows people to carry heavy, loads across long distances without injury or exhaustion. What they're carrying tells the story of Maya, civilization's complexity and interconnectedness. There are obsidian blades from the volcanic highlands of Guatemala, so sharp they can split hairs, and so valuable they're used as currency in regions where volcanic glass doesn't occur naturally. Jade ornaments from the Matagua River Valley, each piece hand-carved and polished to a luster that seems to glow with inner light. Cacao beans from the lowland groves, carefully dried and sorted by size and quality. These aren't just food ingredients, but the primary medium of exchange for small transactions throughout the Maya world. But the most valuable cargo isn't goods at all, it's information. Itzel carries in her memory the current prices for hundreds of different items in dozens of different markets. She knows which cities are experiencing shortages of particular goods, which rulers are planning construction projects that will require large quantities of specific materials, which regions are producing surplus crops that can be purchased cheaply and sold for profit elsewhere. The first day's journey takes them through familiar territory, past farming villages where people wave from their doorways and children run alongside the trading party for short distances before being called back to their chores. The trail here is well maintained, with stone-lined drainage ditches that prevent erosion during the rainy season and rest. Areas with thatched shelters where travelers can escape sudden downpours. As they walk, the traders maintain a conversation that flows like the gentle rhythm of their footsteps. They discuss the current political situation in the cities they plan to visit, share observations about changes in agricultural patterns that might affect crop prices, and exchange stories about interesting people they've met on previous journeys. This isn't idle chatter, it's the continuous information sharing that makes long-distance trade possible in a world without written contracts or communication systems. Faster than human travel. By evening of the first day, they've reached one of the standard camping areas, a cleared space near a reliable water source, with established fire pits and food storage areas that are maintained by the cooperative effort of all traders who use the route. The evening routine unfolds with practiced efficiency. Shelters are erected, fires are built, food is prepared, and guards are assigned to watch for both human threats and the large predators that share these forests. The evening meal is a social event that brings together traders from different expeditions who happen to be camping in the same area. News is exchanged, prices are compared, and partnerships are sometimes formed for mutual benefit and protection. What strikes you as you drift deeper into this gentle world is how trust operates across cultural and linguistic boundaries. These traders represent different cities, different ethnic groups, sometimes even different languages, but they share professional codes of conduct that make cooperation possible, even between potential rivals. The second day takes them into less familiar territory, where the trail becomes more challenging and the settlements more scattered. Here, Itzel's expertise becomes more valuable. She knows which streams are safe to drink from and which might carry disease. She can identify edible plants that can supplement their food supplies. And equally importantly, she knows which plants are toxic and should be avoided. Her knowledge represents generations of accumulated experience, passed down through the trading families who specialize in particular routes and destinations. The goods they carry change subtly as they move through different ecological zones. Items that were common in their home region become exotic and valuable. The obsidian blades that were everyday tools in the volcanic highlands become precious commodities that will be traded for their weight in jade or cacao. Conversely, items that will be common at their destination are carefully protected because they represent the foundation of profitable return journeys. Maya traders operated on the principle of circular exchange rather than simply selling goods for money. They engaged in complex barter networks where items were traded for other items that could then be traded again, with profit accumulating through knowledge of relative values in different markets rather than through simple buy-low-sell-high transactions. A successful trader might make 6 or 8 exchanges during a single journey, each one increasing the total value of the goods they carried as they moved deeper into the wilderness. The pace of travel slows slightly to accommodate the more difficult terrain, but the rhythm of daily life remains the same. Wake before dawn, walk until the heat becomes oppressive. Rest during the afternoon, walk again in the evening cool, make camp, share information and food with other travelers, sleep under the protection of guards and the vast canopy of stars that serves as both ceiling and navigation aid. Conversations during these evening gatherings provide insight into the Maya worldview that's difficult to find in the formal texts and inscriptions that have survived. Traders are practical people who deal with the everyday realities of human nature, environmental challenges, and cultural differences. Their stories reveal a civilization that was remarkably tolerant of diversity, sophisticated in its understanding of economics and resource management, and deeply committed to maintaining the peaceful relationships that made long-distance trade possible. On the 5th day, they encounter their first major river crossing. The bridge here is a masterpiece of Maya engineering, a suspension structure made from woven cables that can support the weight of heavily loaded traders, while flexing enough to absorb the stresses created by wind and water flow. The crossing itself becomes a community event, with traders helping each other transport goods safely across and sharing information about conditions on both sides of the river. River crossings also serve as natural gathering points where different trade routes intersect. Itzel takes advantage of this to conduct some preliminary business, trading a portion of her obsidian for information about market conditions in cities she plans to visit later in the journey. These aren't formal transactions, but the kind of ongoing relationship building that creates the trust networks that make large-scale trade possible as they continue deeper into unfamiliar territory. The cultural landscape begins to change as well. The architectural styles of buildings become different. The clothing worn by local people reflects different aesthetic preferences, and even the languages spoken shift from the familiar dialects of home to variations that require careful listening and sometimes translation through multiple intermediaries. But what remains constant is the underlying framework of Maya civilization, the shared calendar systems that allow people from different cities to coordinate meetings and festivals, the common mathematical notation that makes complex calculations possible regardless of local linguistic differences, and the network of roads and bridges that connects even the most remote settlements to the larger world of Maya culture and commerce by the 10th day. As they approach their first major destination, the trading party has transformed from a group of individuals carrying goods into a mobile community that has developed its own internal relationships, hierarchies, and cooperative strategies. They've shared dangers and discoveries, helped each other through difficult passages, and created the temporary but meaningful bonds that make human cooperation possible across vast distances and cultural differences. As evening falls on this portion of their journey, bringing with it the sounds of a different forest ecosystem and the prospect of reaching civilization again tomorrow, the traders settle into their familiar routine with the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful work well done. In the gentle rhythm of their breathing as they drift toward sleep, we find ourselves carried deeper into the Maya understanding of connection and community, where individual prosperity was always balanced against collective welfare, and where the patient accumulation of relationships across time and distance created the invisible infrastructure that held a great civilization together. In our final gentle journey together, let us visit the most sacred spaces of Maya civilization, where healing happened not through dramatic intervention, but through the patient application of knowledge that had been accumulating for thousands of years. We're entering a world where medicine was inseparable from ceremony, where the treatment of illness required understanding the patient's place in the cosmic order as much as their physical symptoms, and where healing was always a collaborative process between the healer, the patient, and the spiritual forces that govern life itself. Our guide is Itzamnon, not the astronomer or the engineer, but the healer whose name reflects her connection to the Maya creator deity, the Lord of knowledge and patron of medicine. She moves through her work with the same patient attention to detail that we've seen in all Maya crafts. But here the medium is human suffering, and the goal is the restoration of harmony between body, mind, and spirit. Her hands, stained green from working with medicinal plants, carry the accumulated wisdom of generations of healers who understood that true medicine treats the whole person, not just isolated symptoms. The healing center where Itzamna works isn't a sterile modern hospital, but something more like a garden sanctuary, where medicinal plants grow in carefully tended beds, organized according to their therapeutic properties and spiritual associations. The air is thick with the scent of healing herbs, copal for purification, cacao for heart medicine, vanilla for calming the spirit, and dozens of other plants whose names and properties have been preserved in the memories of healers for centuries. Maya medicine was based on the understanding that illness resulted from imbalance between hot and cold forces in the body, between the patient and their social community, between human actions and cosmic harmony. Treatment, therefore, involved not just addressing physical symptoms, but restoring proper relationships at every level of existence. This holistic approach required healers to be simultaneously physicians, psychologists, social workers, and spiritual counselors. The patient who comes to Itzamna this morning is a middle-aged farmer whose chronic joint pain has been interfering with his ability to work. But before she examines his physical condition, Itzamna spends time learning about his family, relationships, his dreams, his recent experiences with conflict or loss, and his spiritual practices. Maya medicine understood that physical symptoms often reflected deeper disharmonies that needed to be addressed for healing to be complete and lasting. The diagnostic process itself is a work of art. Insomnia uses pulse diagnosis feeling for subtle variations in the rhythm and quality of blood flow that indicate different types of imbalance. She examines the patient's eyes, tongue, skin color, and body odor for signs that aren't visible to untrained observers. She asks detailed questions about sleeping patterns, appetite changes, emotional states, and spiritual experiences that might provide clues to underlying causes of illness. Makes Maya medicine particularly beautiful. For our quiet contemplation tonight is its integration of rational observation with spiritual understanding. Insomnia has an encyclopedic knowledge of anatomy and physiology that rivals modern medical understanding. She knows that certain plants contain compounds that reduce inflammation, that specific mineral preparations can treat nutritional deficiencies, and that particular physical therapies can restore mobility to damaged joints. But she also understands that healing involves factors that can't be measured or quantified: the patient's faith in the treatment, the strength of family support systems, the cosmic timing of therapeutic interventions, and the mysterious process by which hope and intention somehow influence physical recovery. Maya medicine worked because it addressed all these levels simultaneously, treating patients as complete human beings rather than collections of symptoms. The preparation of medicines is itself a meditative practice. Insomnia gathers her plant materials during specific phases of the moon, at particular times of day when their active compounds are most concentrated. She prepares her remedies using methods that have been refined through countless generations of experimentation, grinding herbs with stone mortar, extracting essences through careful steaming processes, combining ingredients in proportions that balance therapeutic effectiveness with safety considerations. The treatment she prescribes for the farmer includes both physical and spiritual elements. There's a topical preparation made from plants that contain natural anti-inflammatory compounds, applied with massage techniques that improve circulation and reduce muscle tension. There's also an internal medicine that will help his body eliminate the metabolic waste products that contribute to joint pain. But equally important is the ceremony that will restore his spiritual connection to the earth. Spirits that govern agricultural work, Maya healers, understood that the patient's family and community played crucial roles in the healing process. Insomnia spends time teaching the farmer's wife how to prepare his medicines and administer his treatments. She explains to his children how they can help by taking over some of his heavier work responsibilities during his recovery period. She meets with community elders to ensure that his spiritual reintegration ceremony receives proper support and participation. The ceremonial aspects of Maya healing were elaborate and beautiful. The farmer's treatment will include a ritual cleansing that removes spiritual contamination accumulated through years of imbalanced living. There will be offerings to the gods who govern health and agriculture, presented with the same careful attention to detail that characterizes all Maya religious practices. And there will be divination ceremonies to determine the most auspicious timing for various aspects of his treatment. As the morning progresses, other patients arrive for their appointments. There's a pregnant woman seeking treatment for morning sickness and spiritual protection for her unborn child. an elderly man whose failing eyesight is interfering with his ability to participate in community activities. A young warrior recovering from battle injuries that have healed physically but left him with what we would recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. Each case requires a different combination of physical treatment and spiritual intervention. The pregnant woman receives herbal preparations that reduce nausea while supporting fetal development, combined with ceremonies that invoke the protection of Ixchel, the Maya goddess of childbirth and healing. The elderly man gets medicines that improve circulation to his eyes and treatments for the depression that often accompanies vision loss, along with counseling about finding new roles in community life that don't depend on perfect sight. The young warrior's treatment is the most complex, involving not just herbal medicines for his physical symptoms, but elaborate ceremonies designed to help his spirit recover from the trauma of violence. Maya healers understood that warriors needed special spiritual cleansing to remove the contamination that came from taking human life. Even in legitimate warfare, his treatment will include ritual purification, dream therapy, and gradual reintegration into civilian community roles. What's particularly remarkable about Maya medicine is its empirical foundation. These healers conducted what we would recognize as clinical trials, carefully observing the results of different treatments and modifying their approaches based on outcomes. They maintained detailed records of which treatments worked for which conditions, creating a medical database that was passed down through generations of practitioners. But Maya medicine was also deeply personal. Healers, like Itzamna, developed close, long-term relationships with their patients, serving as family advisors, spiritual counselors, and community mediators as much as medical practitioners. They understood that healing often required addressing social and psychological factors that contributed to illness, and they had the authority and wisdom to intervene in family conflicts, economic disputes, and spiritual crises that were affecting their patients' health as afternoon approaches and the heat begins to build. Itzamna prepares for the midday rest that punctuates all Maya activities. But her work doesn't stop during the quiet hours. She tends her medicinal garden, prepares plant materials for future treatments, and studies the astronomical calendars, timing for different therapeutic interventions. The garden itself is a living pharmacy, organized according to principles that integrate botanical knowledge with spiritual understanding. Plants that treat similar conditions are grown together, creating beneficial interactions that enhance their therapeutic properties. Medicinal herbs are intercropped with food plants, reflecting the Maya understanding that medicine and nutrition are part of the same continuum of health maintenance. Evening brings different types of healing work. This is when Itzamna conducts the ceremonies that address spiritual aspects of illness, using techniques that induce altered states of consciousness for both healer and patient. These rituals aren't primitive superstition, but sophisticated psychological interventions that we're only beginning to understand through modern research into the placebo effect, the role of social support in healing, and the ways that spiritual practices influence physical health. The healing ceremonies are conducted in sacred spaces designed to promote therapeutic states of consciousness. Soft lighting from oil lamps creates an atmosphere of warmth and security. The scent of copal incense helps induce relaxation and spiritual receptivity. Rhythmic music played on traditional instruments synchronizes brainwave patterns and promotes the meditative states that facilitate healing, and the communal participation of family and community members provides the social support that modern medicine has discovered is crucial for recovery from serious illness as full darkness settles over the healing center, bringing with it the night sounds of the forest and the gentle luminescence of fireflies. Itzamna completes her daily routine with the same careful attention to detail that has characterized all her work. Medicines are properly stored, instruments are cleaned and blessed, and the sacred spaces are prepared for tomorrow's healing activities. In the quiet of the night, as the healing center settles into restful silence, there's a profound sense of completion. The day's work has been done with skill and compassion, contributing to the long tradition of Maya healing that sees illness not as random misfortune but as an opportunity for growth, understanding, and deeper integration with the cosmic forces that govern all life. And in that gentle understanding, as we prepare to leave this ancient world of patient wisdom and return to our own time, we carry with us the Maya knowledge that true healing happens slowly, carefully, with attention to the whole person and their place in the larger web of relationships that connect all living things. May these memories of ancient peace guide you into restful sleep, where your own healing continues in the mysterious realm of dreams. And so, dear friends, our quiet journey through the peaceful heart of Maya civilization comes to its gentle close. We've walked with Jade carvers whose patient hands transformed stone into art, with astronomers who mapped the movements of stars with breathtaking precision, with farmers who made the earth itself float on water, with scribes who captured human thought in symbols more beautiful than flowers, with merchants who wove distant cities together through networks of trust and trade, and with healers who understood that true medicine treats the whole person, body and spirit together. In each of these gentle encounters, we've discovered the same underlying rhythm, the patient accumulation of wisdom through careful observation, the understanding that the most important things in life happen slowly and deliberately, and the deep knowledge that individual human lives find their meaning through participation in something larger and more enduring than any single person's existence. The Maya understood what our modern world is slowly rediscovering, that sustainability requires working with natural systems rather than against them, that true prosperity comes from the circulation of wealth rather than its accumulation, and that the most sophisticated technologies are often the ones that seem simplest on the surface but reflect deep understanding of complex underlying principles. As you drift now toward your own peaceful sleep, carry with you the memory of that ancient world where time moved like honey, where human hands created beauty that has survived for over 1,000 years, and where every daily activity was understood to be part of a vast cosmic dance that connects the movements of planets to the growth of corn, the carving of jade to the healing of illness, the writing of books to the patient observation of stars. May these gentle memories of Maya wisdom help you find the same patient peace in your own life, the same understanding that the most important things happen slowly and carefully, with attention to beauty and meaning rather than speed and efficiency. May you sleep as peacefully as the ancient astronomers who knew exactly where they fit in the vast cycles of cosmic time. And may you wake tomorrow with some small portion of their quiet confidence that the universe operates according to laws that can be understood, principles that can be trusted, and patterns that repeat endlessly with variations as beautiful as jade catching moonlight. If you've drifted off during our journey, let me know in the comments below. That means these ancient voices have done their work, carrying you gently into the realm of dreams, where healing and wisdom continue their patient work beyond the reach of conscious thought. Sweet dreams, friends. Until we meet again in the peaceful spaces where history and sleep converge, where ancient wisdom becomes present peace, and where the gentle voices of the past whisper to us softly toward rest.